Take up some remarks made by my colleague Grant Robertson when he referred back to the Woodhouse report and the social contract. What we're seeing in the House today is changes to the legislation which directly and determinedly abrogate that contract. The contract was that the right to sue would be removed, and in the stead of the removal of that right, there was to have been a thing called ACC. And the idea of accident compensation back then was always manifold. It included, for example, back then, 30 years ago, significant attention on injury prevention. It included the idea that a person would be substantially, and the figure chosen was 80%, substantially kept free of the risk of them being injured as a result of an accident through no fault of their own. And it was on the basis of no fault. Now we see, through these changes, creeping deterioration of that contract. And my colleague Grant Robertson and other speakers have given example after example of that. You see, holiday pay would do as an example. One example. If one is sick and goes to work and income and says, I have an illness, I need some sick leave, I wonder if the House could tell me whether or not work and income say you must first of all use all your holiday pay. Is that the case? Yes. Oh, it is the case. When we come to bereavement leave, when we have a situation where someone has an illness and they apply to have access to bereavement leave, are they told use your holiday pay first? No. Are they told to use their holiday pay first? If they have an injury and they work in Parliament, a member of Parliament breaks his or her leg, does that member of Parliament get told by parliamentary services that they, before they go to ACC, must use up their holiday pay? Actually, they don't, for this reason. Members of Parliament, if they break a leg, receive no pay cut at all. Don't go near ACC, don't need to. Because different people in different parts of society, not if they're going to be away for a week or two, and you can be a parliamentarian with a broken leg. I've seen a number of them. There is a difference between people in different strata in society. If I'm a meat worker and I break a leg, pay stops that day. If I'm a member of Parliament and I break a leg, pay does not. And unless I'm away for a long time, pay will not. So you see, we have already a situation where some people in society need not worry too much about ACC and the finer points about whether holiday pay is going to be up for grabs. We are some of them. And yet we, as a group of 120 odd people, are deciding by majority to remove the rights of a whole lot of others, even though we don't even face the problem ourselves. I think that the National Party should be actively defending this legislation, for indeed I find it straightforwardly indefensible. But not a word from them on these transition provisions in Part 2, or indeed much else in this legislation. We see the National Party doing the opposite, staying silent, talking about a system being broken when it's making $1 billion a year profit, and saying that we must move quickly to constrain the ability of people to get accident compensation for financial reasons. Well, that's not the social contract. The social contract was never, we're going to take away the right to sue so long as we can afford it. The social contract was the right to sue goes, and therefore we as society will set out to get some social insurance running to ensure that if people are injured through accident, that then they are held free from personal damage from that. No longer. If you are a meat worker, if one is a meat worker, these days, under this legislation, get injured late in the season. Because if one is injured early in the season, too bad. The way the calculations are done is that injury will be thoroughly, improperly and incompletely compensated. So the person's fault was to get themselves injured early in the season. If they get themselves injured late in the season, then there is less fault visited on the private individual. That isn't a social contract. That's penny pinching. That's penny pinching and it's cheating. And what's more, it's cheating on a group of people who are already limited in their, Mr. Chairman, already limited, Mr.
Pete
Chairman,
Hodgson.
already limited in their ability to secure 12 months income because of the very nature of their seasonal work. So we've got entrenched unfairness being legislated here, and that's not nice. It feels ugly, and it's also, in my view, something that should be defended. I think the people who are about to do this to the public of New Zealand have an obligation to get up and say why, an obligation to give the other point of view, an obligation to say there are reasons behind this and here they are. This is supposed to be a debating chamber. It isn't. It's an echo chamber because there is nothing coming back from the Minister and the Chair, and there is nothing coming back from the so-called staunch supporters on the National Party, every one of whom is going to vote yes to pass this legislation, not one of whom is getting up and defending it. Now, is there a word for that that begins with C that I'm not allowed to use? There may be. There may be. Let me just ask another question. Why is the hearing loss threshold of 6% defensible? Why is that defensible? Does that mean that the government has come to the view that all hearing loss of 5% must be age-related, and that hearing loss beyond that may be accident-linked or injury-linked? Okay, so I'm advised by one of my colleagues, the Honourable David Parker, who is our spokesperson on ACC and who knows about these things, tells me that actually the way it's done is that the age-related hearing loss is estimated first and then 6% is added. Well now, that means that if one is an older New Zealander, one needs to have hearing loss somewhat more than 6% before ACC will indicate. So if hearing loss that is age-related is already taken into account, why is the figure not 0%? Let's see if the government can answer that. If it were to be 1%, then that means that the little wee accident was not compensatable. That itself is a break of the social contract. But we've got ourselves up to 6%. And I suspect that many people in the public are not aware that 6% hearing loss is substantial. It doesn't mean that someone hears 94% of everything. It doesn't mean that. It does mean that in a busy society where there is a lot of incidental noise and where there may be more than one conversation running, that hearing loss is very substantial under those circumstances. So we've got ourselves a 6% threshold, no doubt stolen from some other jurisdiction, that no doubt did not have that social contract in the first place. This is unique, this system, to New Zealand. It's unique in our history. It is the envy of the world. And when one goes to Australia, I suspect the 6% came from Australia, did it? Does anyone? Oh, it's been misrepresented. It came from Australia, but it got aberrated on the way over. Trans-Tasman aberration. But if we go to Australia, we don't even find the history of the social contract. How do we know? Because any doctor in Australia, you get into a conversation with any doctor in Australia, will sooner or later say, gosh, we'd like your ACC because we wouldn't have to self-insure so much for our practice. We don't have we wouldn't have to put up with ambulance chasing lawyers. You don't have them in New Zealand, we have them in Australia. You see, the system is different. Not only that, it is known to be better. So why would one take a system which is known to be better, proven to be better? In fact, wasn't there a great big report only in 2008? PricewaterhouseCoopers report, big tick, was it? Am I right? Big tick, change of government, oh, let's change it. That has to be defended in this House. National members of Parliament must get up and answer that. What did PricewaterhouseCoopers get wrong? Can I ask my colleagues across the chamber? What did they get wrong? It was a massive report, and all the National Party and opposition could say at the same time, did they say it cost too much? They probably did say it cost too much. Did they read it? Who knows? The big review saying things are pretty good around ACC, and only months later it somehow has all turned to custard. It is not believable. It is not credible. It is not defensible, and therefore it must be defended by the people who are going to vote for this legislation to come forward. I say to them, they've got an obligation to get up and put their point of view. We'll listen to it, to put their point of view so that the public can see what the other side of the debate